The United States and Israel have attacked Iran, and Iran says it is defending itself. In this struggle, the overall situation is becoming more and more concerning.
It reminds us of past events in history and raises fears about how quickly such confrontations can escalate into far more dangerous scenarios. History shows that when tensions between powerful nations intensify, the consequences can spread far beyond the region and affect the entire world.
In August 1945, a single bomb destroyed an entire city in seconds. 3 days later, another city vanished under a second explosion. The world had never seen anything like it before. But how did humanity reach the point where nuclear weapons were used against civilians? To understand that moment, we have to go back to the brutal final years of World War II. The conflict between the United States and Japan began suddenly. On December 7, 1941, hundreds of Japanese aircraft attacked the American naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. In less than 2 hours, over 2,400 Americans were killed, 188 aircraft destroyed, 8 battleships heavily damaged. The attack shocked the United States. The next day, America declared war on Japan. The Pacific War had begun. In the early years of the war, Japan moved incredibly fast. Its military captured vast territories across Asia and the Pacific. Within months, Japan controlled the Philippines, Hong Kong, Singapore, Indonesia, much of China and Southeast Asia. At its peak, the Japanese Empire stretched across an area larger than Europe. But the momentum would not last forever. By 1943, the United States had begun pushing Japanese forces back across the Pacific, but this was not a simple advance. The US used a strategy known as island hopping. Instead of attacking every Japanese position, American forces captured key islands that could serve as air bases and naval bases. With each island captured, American bombers moved closer to Japan itself, but every island turned into a deadly battlefield. The Pacific War was different from the war in Europe. Japanese soldiers were trained under the Bushido warrior code, which taught that surrender was dishonorable. Many soldiers chose to fight until death. Some even took their own lives rather than become prisoners. This meant that battles rarely ended quickly. They ended only when one side had been completely destroyed. One of the most famous battles occurred in February 1945 on a small volcanic island called Iwo Jima. The island was tiny, only about 21 square kilometers, but it was strategically important because it could serve as an emergency landing base for American bombers flying to Japan. Japanese defenders transformed the island into a fortress. They built 18 kilometers of underground tunnels, bunkers, and hidden artillery positions. For 36 days, American Marines fought through ash, caves, and fortified positions. Nearly all 21,000 Japanese defenders died. The United States suffered 26,000 casualties. The famous photo of Marines raising the American flag on Mount Suribachi came from this battle. Just weeks later came an even worse battle. The Battle of Okinawa began in April 1945. Okinawa was only 550 kilometers from mainland Japan. The Japanese military knew that if Okinawa fell, the invasion of Japan would be next. So they fought with everything they had. The battle lasted 82 days. The casualties were staggering. 12,000 American soldiers killed, 50,000 wounded, over 100,000 Japanese soldiers killed, more than 100,000 civilians died. Japan also launched waves of kamikaze attacks. These were suicide missions where pilots deliberately crashed their aircraft into enemy ships. More than 1,500 kamikaze attacks were carried out during the battle. American commanders were stunned by the scale of the destruction. If this was the cost of one island, what would happen when the war reached Japan itself? The Allies began preparing for the invasion of the Japanese mainland. The plan was called Operation Downfall. Military planners feared the invasion could become the bloodiest battle in history. Some estimates predicted up to 500,000 American casualties, possibly millions of Japanese deaths. Japan had begun training civilians to fight with bamboo spears and basic weapons. Even school children were preparing to defend their country. While these invasion plans were being discussed, a secret scientific program had been underway in the United States. It was called the Manhattan Project. More than 130,000 scientists and workers worked in secret to build a weapon unlike anything the world had ever seen, the atomic bomb. On July 16, 1945, the first nuclear explosion in history was successfully tested in the New Mexico desert. The explosion was brighter than the sun. The shockwave shattered windows miles away. The weapon worked. On August 6, 1945, an American B-29 bomber named Enola Gay flew over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. At exactly 8:15 in the morning, the bomb was released. 43 seconds later, it exploded 600 meters above the city. The blast instantly destroyed nearly everything within a 2-kilometer radius. Temperatures near the center reached several million degrees. Around 70,000 people died instantly. By the end of the year, the death toll reached about 140,000. Japan did not surrender immediately, so 3 days later, on August 9, a second atomic bomb was dropped on the city of Nagasaki. Despite the mountainous terrain reducing the blast area, the explosion still caused devastating destruction. By the end of 1945, about 70,000 people had died. But another event also pushed Japan towards surrender. On August 8, 1945, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan. Within days, Soviet forces crushed Japan's powerful Quantum Army in Manchuria. Japan now faced defeat from both the United States and the Soviet Union. Japan's leadership realized the war could not continue. For the first time, Emperor Hirohito personally intervened in political decisions. On August 15, 1945, the emperor addressed the nation by radio. Japan would surrender. After 6 years of global war, World War II had finally come to an end. The atomic bombings ended the deadliest war in human history, but they also introduced a terrifying new reality. Humanity now possessed weapons capable of destroying entire cities in seconds. The nuclear age had begun, and the world would never be the same again.
History shows how quickly regional tensions can grow into global catastrophe. What began as political rivalries in the 1930s eventually escalated into World War II, a conflict involving more than 50 nations and causing around 60 to 75 million deaths worldwide, making it the deadliest war in human history. Today, when tensions rise between major powers such as Iran, the United States, Israel, and their allies, the world is reminded of how dangerous escalation can become. History warns that if conflicts are not contained through diplomacy and restraint, regional confrontations can evolve into crises that reshape the entire world. The lesson of the past is clear. Preventing the next global disaster depends on learning from the last one. Our world needs peace, not wars.